Welcome to Country Fried Rock, where we talk with musicians to find out what inspires their creativity. Country Fried Rock, music uncovered. My guest today is Tara Nevins of Donna the Buffalo on her solo effort, Wood and Stone. Thank you, Tara, for being with us on Country Fried Rock.
Well, thanks for having me.
How did you learn to play as a kid?
Where I grew up, where I went to school, had a public school system that I grew up in, had a really good music department, and I was offered, like everybody in grammar school, whatever, to pick an instrument, and I chose the violin. And so I basically learned, in public school and then through high school to play violin. And I also had an acoustic guitar at home, and I started, I taught myself to play guitar at home. And I always really loved music. My mother and father loved music, and we're always having folks up. They grew up in Greenwich Village, and on the weekends. And they grew up in Greenwich Village, and then when they got older and they got married, they left the city and moved up to where I grew up in Orangeburg, New York, which, is a suburb of New York City, I guess you'd say. And so on the weekends, all their crazy friends from Greenwich Village would come up, and they'd pull back the rugs and, have these just get-togethers almost every weekend and dance all night, listen to music. So my family, there's always a lot of music in my family and a lot of support for me playing music. So when I was playing the violin through high school and learning the acoustic guitar and buying my songbooks, my James Taylor and Carole King and, all my songbooks, learning all these different songs, I actually started writing songs then too. I guess when I was then in college for my classical studies, I discovered old-time fiddle music. And so it was then that my world shifted in direction kind of. Although I have to say that even when I was in high school, I was fascinated by fiddle music, and I had a Mel Bay fiddle book, and I would actually sit in the back of orchestra practices and sort of be, while the conductor was talking to the trumpet section or something, I'd be back there, playing, really quietly, trying to play Turkey in the Straw out of my Mel Bay fiddle book. So
That's great.
I always had an affinity for that. And when I was in high school also, I guess it was high school, that I got the album, Will the Circle Be Unbroken?
Yes.
And that was, really inspirational to me. But then I went off to college and was in the classical, music program. But there, my roommate turned out to be someone who played in an old-time fiddle band. That turned my head right there. And the minute I graduated out of college, I just dove into traveling to fiddle festivals and playing fiddle music. And I never played another note of classical music after I graduated. I just dove right into what I think had been a yearning inside of me all along, and so I kind of went down that road into the world of traditional music, and over the years I'm part of a large community of folks that play old-time fiddle music, and during that time, and you naturally discover other traditional musics when you're doing that, and so I traveled to Louisiana and discovered the Zydeco and the Cajun, Creole music there, and fell in love with that and bought an accordion, and this whole time was, writing songs. And so it was sort of like over a course of many years, just an evolution of, and then I was playing the old-time fiddle music, and for 10 years was in a band called the Heartbeats, an all-female string band, and 3 hard-driving fiddle tunes and songs, and then Donna the Buffalo started. And so now Donna the Buffalo, is sort of has a combination of a lot of all of these influences, the fiddle music and the country music and the Zydeco music and so on and so forth, and I still travel to all these fiddle festivals and I'm part of this old-time fiddle community, and it's a big part of, I guess, where my sort of center of music comes from. And so, that's also the need to make a record like I just did, too.
I appreciate that. You encapsulated what it is that drives someone as creative as you are to investigate these different styles within what they're doing. Have you been based out of the greater New York area this whole time?
Yeah, basically. I'm hardly ever here. But yes, I spent 4 years, 2 years ago, 4 years leading up to 2 years ago. God, does that make sense? I spent 4 years spending a lot of time basically sort of living in Huntsville, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually where a lot of this record was written. And but I'm from here, and I still have my apartment here, and that's where I am right now, and we have a few days off. And so, but I travel so much. I really am hardly ever here. And
Sure.
I'd love to move to the South. I love the South.
If you're going to move to the South, Alabama will do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I was seeing someone, and one of the relationships reflected in the album, the writing of the record. I never would have necessarily looked at the map and pointed and put my finger on Alabama necessarily, because a lot of the fiddle music I play, I traveled to North Carolina a lot, Virginia and such, and so I did travel, and I enjoy Tennessee, but I hadn't really had much of any experience with Alabama. But after spending time there, I just really fell in love with Huntsville, and I really, really like Alabama, and I have just this yearning to move to the South. I have the opportunity, I may. Hey, this is Tara Nevins, and you're listening to Country Fried Rock.
I wondered what led to covering Stars Fell in Alabama.
What actually led me to covering that is when I was living in Huntsville, I was approached by these gentlemen that were directing and producing a movie called 20 Years After, and they asked me, they knew I was spending time there in town, and I was hooked up with them, and they asked me if I would rewrite that song, Stars Fell in Alabama. They said, the jazz classic, Stars Fell in Alabama, would you consider kind of rewriting it for the movie in an old-time sort of mountain music approach, Same lyrics, but completely different melody and treatment. And basically, I was commissioned to do that, and I did that, and it's in the soundtrack of the movie. So that's where that came from, but definitely probably would never have come my way as an opportunity if I hadn't been living in Huntsville, Alabama. And it's just funny that the song is called Stars Fell in Alabama. I mean, how horrible. I was talking to a friend down there last night. Huntsville was hit pretty hard. It's just awful. And I have friends down there just sort of because, they lost electricity. And when you lose that, you can't charge your cell phone.
Right. And it's been terrible. Over 300 people killed. I mean, just the Tuscaloosa, Birmingham, all the way up to Huntsville, just terrible.
I know. It makes you really crazy things that have been happening weather-wise, This makes you really wonder what's going on just around the world with all the tsunamis and the earthquakes and the fires and the extra snow these places that don't normally get it, and these storms and these 100 and something tornadoes hitting down in Alabama.
Insane.
I can't even fathom that. It makes you think that, it's all true and that the world is about to end or something. And when I was spending time in Huntsville, there would be warnings and the sirens would go off, but there never was one in Huntsville in my time.
Right.
Time there,
We've had a lot of focus on the resurgence in the Muscle Shoals sound and the Muscle Shoals music scene right now, but not so much old-time music coming out of Alabama. What kind of support did you have for playing live there, or were you simply based there and on the road a lot?
I was based there, and I was on the road a lot. But there's definitely a group of folks that play old-time music there. In fact, where I was living, there was a fellow and his wife that lived right down the street from me that I actually knew from the old-time community, and I spent a little bit of time with them, and that was really nice. I was definitely invited to some gatherings. And so, it doesn't have a super loud voice there in Huntsville anyway, but it's there. I did experience it a little bit while I was there. But, I was on the road a lot, and when I was there, I was taking it pretty easy.
You said you wrote the bulk of this record while you were living there. When I first listened to this, I had these little snippets of inspiration from completely different music, and it just really drew me in. So what was leading you creatively to this solo venture?
Well, I made this is my second solo album. I made one came out also on Sugar Hill Records, probably 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah.
It was called Mule to Ride, and it was really an old-time sort of slash like early bluegrass kind of sound. And it really featured my fiddle playing and sort of a cast of thousands, and I only sang maybe 2 songs on it, mostly traditional public domain material, and I knew how to do that. I knew how to present it. I knew how to produce it, so I produced the record and all that. I always knew I would do another one. It was part of my whole situation with Sugar Hill, and I wanted to do another one. It took me this long to get around to it, just being busy in Donna the Buffalo, and also, and I'm glad it took this long because I knew that. Anyway, so because it's been this many years, I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to do the same thing again, of course. Well, I guess what happened was I just started writing these songs. I was married for a long time, and I thought I would always be married, And 6 years ago, that marriage ended, and it was a huge shift in my life, my level of independence and all that. And from then till now, I've had some other relationships, and it's been a time of a lot of discovery and finding your core and your strength, and it's been actually really a great time of discovery and just reflection on these relationships. And I just, in this time period and living in Huntsville, I just started writing these songs, and it kind of came together, and I thought, this is my record, this is what I have to say right now. And this is, the fiddle will be on this record, and it is. It's not always the main featured instrument. Larry Campbell's wonderful, pedal steel and electric guitar, and then there's banjo, and, so on and so forth. And, life just works in a mysterious way, as we know. And for some reason, I was just led in this direction, and these songs came about, and then my opportunity to record with Larry Campbell came about. And I realized actually when I was writing these songs, I was getting excited, and I was thinking, wow, these songs, like, when you make a record, you kind of want to paint a picture, and you kind of want to say something. It's kind of nice to send one sort of vibe out there, or one sort of message. And when I was writing these songs, I was like, God, these songs, they're not downers, even though they're about relationships. They're pretty upbeat. I like the vibe. And, I think all these songs together could make paint one cool picture in a record. I wasn't sure how to do it, because it wasn't about just playing bluegrass or old time music. It's about songs. It's about me singing. It's about what instrumentation should I use. I don't want it to be like rock and roll. I don't want it to be totally soft tracks with no drums. Somewhere in the middle, I don't know exactly how to do this. So I realized I didn't want to produce it myself. I wanted someone to help me. But I had a sort of an idea in my head of what I wanted it to be. So I think that my marriage ending and the 6 years in between writing these songs, spending the time in Huntsville, Alabama, just this whole growth period, I guess you say, self-discovery. It's a pretty introspective record, and it just kind of led me in this direction. And I don't know, here I am. And then I got the opportunity to work with Larry Campbell, and, here comes the record. Hey, this is Tara Nevins. Check out my new record, Wood and Stone. You can go to my Facebook page and check it out there, or www.donnathebuffalo.com, and you can order it by going to www.funkyside.com. Because I wrote the songs mainly in Huntsville, Alabama, and Huntsville, Alabama is only about 96 miles from Nashville. So when I was down there, I would spend time in Nashville, and I grew fond of Nashville, and I just always thought that I would record this record there. Because I wrote the music down there, I was entrenched in the Southern vibe, and I just thought, well, these songs came out of my pores here, so I better record them here. I was all stuck on that kind of. And when it came time to really decide, a friend of mine, Jim Lauderdale, who you might know of, I was talking to him about it, and he said, he called me and he said, I think Larry Campbell is your guy. And I didn't know Larry personally. I knew about who he was, and about Levon's band and all that. And I said, really, you think so? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. He's fantastic. I think he's going to get where you're at. I think he's going to get it. And so he very kindly, he called Larry on my behalf, and he connected us, and I sent Larry my ideas and the music, and it was right up Larry's alley. He was really into the idea of presenting this music that was coming from me, sort of based in this more traditional place, but wanting to make it a little more modern or edgy, or as you hear on the record. And so it was just so fortunate and such a funny, some kind of synchronicity. It was kind of right up his alley. He would want to sink his teeth into, So that's how that came about. And so then I was like, okay, wow, I'm not going to record it in the South. I'm going to record it in Woodstock, New York, which is basically in my backyard. It's an hour and 20 minutes from where I am here in Piermont, New York. And I had to wrestle with it just a little bit because, my heart, or maybe it's my neurotic side or something, was a little stuck in, well, I better do it down south. That's where I wrote. But, it came pretty clear to me very quickly that no, I'm from New York State. It doesn't matter where I wrote the songs, the essence of them will come out. And I decided to work with Larry up at Levon Helm's studio in Woodstock. And just from the get-go, I was like, okay, I made the right decision. I'm in the perfect place.
I guess I've only interviewed a couple of people who have recorded up at Levon's studio. What was your method with this one?
We tracked the basic tracks live. Larry played acoustic guitar, and Byron Isaacs played upright bass, and Justin Whip played drums. He also engineered it at the same time that he was playing drums. And then I would either be just singing the song, or I'd be playing the fiddle for them to play too, or I'd be playing the acoustic guitar. But that's how we tracked that much of it live. Then we overdubbed vocal, and we overdubbed, instruments. Larry would overdub either the pedal steel or the electric guitar or the mandolin or the banjo. He's brilliant.
This record is new. Have you been road testing the music live?
Not really. What I released date was just yesterday, which is exciting. And We just came from Merle Fest past weekend. I was there with Donna the Buffalo, and I had my own set, Tara Nevins and Friends, and that was the first time that I've really, tried to represent this record in some way live. And I played with an acoustic group with the 2 acoustic guitars and a banjo and an upright bass and myself, and we did like 5 songs from the record. And like maybe 4 or 5 fiddle tunes. That went over great. That was really fun. But Donna the Buffalo, we do sing a couple of these songs already a little bit. And I'm sure we'll do more of that and learn maybe 1 or 2 more of some other ones on the record. To answer your question about road testing it, I hadn't really road tested it in a sort of acoustic, kind of format. But we had played a few of the songs in Donna the Buffalo, given sort of a little sneak preview to.
Speaking of your fans with the group, they, at least from the outside, seem to be very supportive of the solo ventures of each of you within the band.
Oh, absolutely. Our fans are wonderful. We're so fortunate to have, we just have fans everywhere. There's some real organized fans that take part in the herd. They're a self-organized bunch, and, they love us, we love them. They're interested in whatever we have. They're interested in whatever we're doing. If Jeb makes a solo record, they want to know all about it. If I make a solo record, they want to know all about it, And it's fantastic, really. And Jeb and I actually recently have been starting to do some duo shows where it's just he and I. It's like Donna the Buffalo songs pared down to just me and Jeb. And they're real supportive of that, too. It's just a journey, and we're all on it together, and they want to be part of it, and it's just we're all on this ride.
Creatively, it's nice to be able to have the freedom to do your own thing as well, because the dynamic of a band is always different.
Absolutely, yes. I've been asked that question here in the past few days a lot, and, it just comes down to you're in a band, you're painting a certain picture, you're part of a group, decision-making process. It's everyone's essence in there. But when you sort of step away and do something on your own, it's, you get to choose your own colors. You get to paint the picture you want to paint. You get to express what you feel like expressing. I think it's healthy, interesting for people that know the band and want to know more about the individual members. I think it's only healthy, and it's inspiring, and it's exciting. As an artist, you want to paint as many pictures as you can.
Kind of switching gears, you've had the opportunity to just travel immensely in your life, but was there anything about living in Alabama that kind of culturally stuck out to you?
I had never lived like on a day-to-day basis in the South. I've traveled to the South extensively and to perform, to go to fiddle festivals, to visit people. But living there day-to-day in northern Alabama, I don't know, would you consider that the Deep South or the beginning of the Deep South, maybe? I guess what I definitely felt something really different. It's hard to put all that into words and to say it really accurately, but I felt there was something really laid back and something that felt very non-judgmental that I really liked. I felt like people made room for each other and were not real judgmental. Not that where I live or that the people I know are horribly judgmental, but there's a difference. There's some kind of subtle thing there, and I can't exactly put my finger on it. I also really like the weather. Northern Alabama, the weather was not as extreme as I might have thought it might have been. It was very tolerable, and I enjoy the lasting warmth into the fall and winter. People are people, but I guess the way people relate to one another differs a little from place to place. And yeah, I just felt that subtle difference that I just told you about. And I guess one thing I can mention. Yeah. What
place has been a pleasant surprise?
Well, I guess I have to say Huntsville, Alabama. We had played in Huntsville a few times before over the years, and I never got a strong feeling from it. We played in a club there and come and go, and to me it was just another place where we landed and played, and it was fun, but, I didn't know much about the local. So when I got to spend time there, I was very surprised at how much I really, really enjoyed it. Hey, this is Tara Nevins. Please check out my new record, Wood and Stone. You can go to my Facebook page and find me there, and you can order the record by going to www.funkyside.com, and you can check me out, too, at www.donnathebuffalo.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much for doing this.
Country Fried Rock. Find the full playlist from this episode on countryfriedrock.org. Check us out on iTunes. No music, just talk. Our theme music is from The Full Tones. Our Country Fried Rock stinger is from Steve Soto and the Twisted Hearts. Country Fried Rock. Copyright 2012 by Lilypad Productions. All rights reserved.
Ever he been helping us some country fried rock?
Hey y'all, it's Sloane Spencer. Thanks so much for finding all these new old episodes of Country Fried Rock. I've got something completely different available these days called Sleep with Rock Stars. And it all started from a listener comment back in the very early days of Country Fried Rock who said, I slow these down to 75% and fall asleep to them. And I was like, well, over the years I started thinking about it, and I recently started Sleep with Rock Stars. It's the Gen X sleep podcast, and you can find it at sleepwithrockstars.com or your favorite podcast app.